The United States and Russia agreed to address irritants to the US-Russia relationship and begin working on a path to end Russia's war in Ukraine. The Atlantic Council's Africa Center in Washington hosted a discussion on the current state and future of the Horn of Africa countries. And the 2021 State of Universal Health Coverage in Africa report shows that less than half of people in Africa have access to the health care they need. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. The United States and Russia talks in Saudi Arabia on ending the war in Ukraine have ended on Tuesday. Top Russian diplomats met with U.S. officials, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, to discuss improving ties and negotiating an end to the conflict in Europe. However, no Ukrainian officials were present at the meeting. Secretary Rubio, U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff met for over 4 hours with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov as a follow-up to U.S. President Donald Trump's telephone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin last week. They discussed establishing a mechanism to address annoyances to the U.S.-Russia bilateral relationship with the goal of normalizing diplomatic relations, according to State Department spokeswoman Tammy Bruce. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says his country won't accept any outcome from this week's talks if Kyiv doesn't participate. European allies are also expressing concerns they are being sidelined. Meanwhile, European leaders held a crisis meeting in parts to discuss Ukrainian and European security. As Henry Ridgwell reports, Monday's meeting comes after a wave of diplomatic interventions by Washington that are raising doubts over America's commitment to NATO.
A few days of bruising diplomacy have shaken the foundation of European security. French President Emmanuel Macron hosted several European leaders in Paris for crisis talks Monday, including British Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
We Europeans will have to do more. The issue of burden sharing is not new, but it is now pressing. And Europeans will have to step up, both in terms of spending and the capabilities that we provide.
Starmer said he was prepared to commit British forces on the ground in Ukraine if there is a lasting peace agreement.
But there must be a US backstop, because a US security guarantee is the only way to effectively deter Russia from attacking Ukraine again.
A series of policy shifts by Washington has transformed Europe's geopolitical calculations. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told NATO allies last week that Europe must provide the overwhelming share of aid for Ukraine as it fights Russian invaders, adding that the United States was no longer, quote, primarily focused on the security of Europe. Then US President Donald Trump spoke to Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin, effectively ending Moscow's isolation. Both agreed to begin Ukraine peace talks in Saudi Arabia, scheduled for Tuesday, with Ukraine and Europe excluded from the table.
We are witnessing tectonic shifts of the order structures and also of the positioning of major powers.
European leaders must make some big decisions, another analyst says.
Not just maintaining, but upping support for Ukraine, given it's very clear that the US is not going to play a major role anymore in the way that it has under Biden, but also for European defence and security in the medium to longer term, what that's going to look like. So there's huge questions hanging over Europeans.
Only 23 of 32 NATO members met the alliance target of spending at least 2% of gross domestic product on defence, let alone the 5% demanded by Donald Trump.
Well, that's going to be the really difficult thing for many Europeans who are operating in a fiscally very constrained space.
US criticism went beyond questions of defence. At the Munich Security Conference over the weekend, US Vice President J.D. Vance criticised mass migration and a perceived attack on freedom of speech in Europe.
The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America.
Those comments were described as unacceptable by German officials. Europe is reeling from the new tone in transatlantic relations, says Van Rij.
What has come as a surprise is the style in which this has been done, and that's been really kind of breaking all the norms in terms of how diplomacy is conducted, where really reality is hit very, very clearly.
A reality to which Europe and Ukraine must adapt fast. Henry Ridgwell, VOA News.
A badly injured child is among at least 19 people who were hurt when a Delta Airlines plane flipped upside down upon its landing at Toronto's Pearson Airport. The airport confirmed on X that what it called an incident occurred Monday involving a Delta flight from Minneapolis. It says all 80 passengers and crew have been accounted for. Video from the scene shows the jet upside down on the snowy tarmac as emergency workers hose it down. The plane was somewhat obscured by snow from a winter storm that hit Toronto over the weekend. It's too early to say what caused the plane to flip, but weather may have played a factor. According to the Meteorological Service of Canada, the airport was experiencing blowing snow and winds of 50 kilometers per hour, gusting to 65 kilometers per hour. Civil society organizations in Uganda are calling for the immediate release of Uganda's opposition leader Kizza Besigye following a recent Supreme Court ruling. Besigye's health is deteriorating and he's been on hunger strike and is now hospitalized. For more insight, I'm joined live from here in Washington by Daniel Kawuma, a Ugandan human rights activist. Daniel, welcome to Africa 54. Definitely numerous civil society organizations have condemned Besigye's incarceration and calling for his release. What will it take to secure his release?
Thank you so much for having me. It's really a very sad tale once again from our country, Uganda. But no one should be surprised about what's happening. This is political persecution. And anyone who has known Museveni the last 39 years, he has been in power. Anytime you are getting near an election, he usually arrests his political opponents. And Dr. Kizza Besigye is one of the most arrested politicians on the continent of Africa. And even in this situation where he was abducted from Nairobi, he actually wasn't on Ugandan soil when he was arrested this time. He was abducted from Nairobi and driven in the middle of the night and charged before the military court-martial in Uganda. And we have seen this cycle of arrests of politicians in Uganda time and time again. Even recently, Bobi Wine, the other leader of opposition in Uganda, was arrested before the 2021 election and charged for treason with guns and ammunition planted in his hotel room. So this is not surprising once again, and it's going to take both internal and external pressure. Internally, we have seen civil society step up. We are seeing our opposition leaders as well as activists also stand up and promise to have peaceful protests in Uganda. But we are going to require a lot of external pressure because Museveni gets most of his support and wealth from abroad. So we are going to need taxpayers in the Western world as well as stakeholders in United States, in European Union and UK, among other nations, to step up and put pressure on the Museveni regime.
Daniel, let me ask you, is there any contentious issue between President Yoweri Museveni and Kizza Besigye, who was his personal physician, that we don't know about that could be contributing to his incarceration and the treatment that he has received so far?
Ever since Dr. Kizza Besigye chose to run against his former client, Museveni, in 2000, he has been arrested time and time again. So the only contentious issue really is that anyone who chooses to run against Museveni, he's arrested, he's abducted, and he's charged for treason. That's something which we have seen in every election cycle in Uganda once again. So it's something which is not only affecting the opposition leaders, but even civilians. We have young men and women who have been in detention over years without trial simply because they choose to speak up against the 39-year Museveni regime. So this is just an issue of politics. It's not an issue that there was a crime which was committed. So like I said previously, we need to speak up against these violations of human rights. We need support of the Western world, civil society organizations, and stakeholders across the world to make sure that Museveni releases Dr. Kizza Besigye.
I think very well said, Daniel. Thank you very much for your insight on what's happening in Uganda. Daniel Kawuma is a Ugandan human rights activist and diaspora leader. The Atlantic Council's Africa Center in Washington hosted a discussion on the developments in Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia, and Djibouti. The discussion focused on the current state and future of the Horn of Africa countries and what influence visiting countries are having in the region. VOA's Philip Alexiou reports.
Good morning from Washington, D.C.
The five-member panel of experts painted a complicated picture of countries in a region that have struggled to find lasting stability. Add to that, countries like China, Russia, Turkey, and the United States, among others, play their own role in either to help or some might say complicate things. Rare earth minerals have every country's interest, and water access from the Red Sea, the Nile River, and the Gulf of Aden have Africa's focus. In Sudan, a country at war with millions of people being displaced and starving and in need of constant aid, where is that going? Khaloud Kher is the founder and director of Confluence Advisory and says history indicates wars like Sudan have a trajectory of 20 years and that it's only been about 3 years so far.
And even if the war doesn't last 20 years, we have, unfortunately, a set of actors that have now mushroomed. We have, rather than two main belligerent actors where we started with in April of 2023, or four really, if you count the non-signatories to the peace agreement, we now have maybe a dozen, maybe more. And this makes it extremely difficult for outside actors to try and corral these groups together.
Add to that the rift between Ethiopia and Somalia after Ethiopia signed a non-binding agreement with the breakaway Republic of Somaliland last year. Michael Woldemariam, associate professor at the University of Maryland, says there are solutions to be had, but reinvigorating a regional peace initiative would be a start.
I think we need a region-wide conversation, one that's actually trans-regional, right? That brings the African side of the Red Sea and the Middle Eastern side of the Red Sea together to dialogue about the ways in which various conflicts across the region can be de-escalated.
Woldemariam says the U.S. can and should play a role because they have the capabilities and relationships with everyone in the region, except perhaps Eritrea. But the new administration is recalibrating its foreign policy, and until President Trump selects African envoys, the best guess for U.S. engagement today lies in its recent involvement, according to Laurent Cloche-Blanchard, a specialist in African affairs at the Congressional Research Service.
At the very end of Congress, we saw legislation passed to require the next administration to appoint another special envoy for Sudan. How quickly the Trump administration will move on that is not yet clear.
As the Sudan continues to percolate, so do the tensions between Eritrea and Ethiopia. Alan Boswell, project director for the Horn of Africa at the International Crisis Group, says what used to be the anchor of regional stability between Ethiopia and Kenya is different with the rise of Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Since the Tigray War, there's still an ongoing insurgency in Oromia and another in the Amhara region. Then there's a bitter dispute, he says, with Egypt over building the Grand Renaissance Ethiopian Dam, a big concern for Egypt.
I was just in Cairo last week, and I'll say that for the Egyptians, it's no longer about just that dam. It's also now about what they fear will be future dams by the Ethiopians and by recent ratification by upstream countries of the Nile Basin Initiative, which it considers a threat. And then on top of all that, there's been very escalating tensions with Eritrea.
Boswell feels the tensions between Ethiopia and Eritrea could lead to civil war, and the percolating situation in Sudan is not helping.
We could see it merge with the war in Sudan if it's still going on, and we would undoubtedly see a proxy war among allied Middle Eastern powers over this as well. It could destabilize not just the region, but the Red Sea as well. It's a very worrying possibility.
The control of water has its own challenges, but beyond that, Boswell says talk of the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa of replacing the dollar with blockchain technology is another thing to watch, as the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Egyptians, the Ethiopians wondering what impact such a change would mean to them. Nonetheless, with so much instability, Woldemariam says for the U.S. to be more effective in bringing stability, experience has shown that special envoy offices need to be structured in the right way so there are resources with enough staffing to handle the complex arrangements with so many different countries.
They need lines of connection and communication with top levels of the State Department, the White House, to be able to mobilize the U.S. government. I mean, you just don't want them on an island doing their thing without the kind of senior level support that's necessary. So the structure of that effort needs some attention.
Philip Alexio, VOA News, Washington.
The Democratic Republic of Congo government is urging Rwanda to cease its alleged support for the M23 rebel group. Rwanda denies any links. The M23 has made significant territorial gains, including the capture of Goma in January and Bukavu, where residents welcomed them over the weekend. For an update, VOA's Paul Ndiho spoke with Fabien Mwizi, Secretary General of the Center of Political and Strategic Studies based in Bukavu.
I'm in Bukavu. And as you have heard from the news, from Sunday morning, the troops of M23 and AFC says the Bukavu town. Before them to enter the town, the military soldiers who left the town left many weapons in the hands of boy streets, and these boys were looting. They made looting, thefts, and people were very terrorized on Saturday, looking for those who were looting, who were destroying the stores, and until now the situation is very calm.
Who was looting exactly? Is it the rebels or the government soldiers who are fleeing?
Those who were looting, when the government soldiers left the city, they left many weapons, and those weapons were taken by street boys, and the children they left in the camp. It's those children and other gangsters who were looting on Saturday. But the troops of M23 and Nanga, when they came, they tried to restore the security, and they looked for those people who were looting, and until now the situation is very calm.
Previously in Goma, we saw a lot of people fleeing for their lives, people being displaced from their homes. Is that a similar scenario in Bukavu?
No, in Bukavu there is not that situation. People left Bukavu before the entrance of the M23 troops. But since yesterday, people are in the house. Some are getting out now. I've made even some rounds to see what is. I'm almost in the city center. I made some kilometers on foot, seeing what is going on, and I saw some people are now getting out. They are walking in the street. Others were going to the market to buy something for their food.
How about some of the reports saying that a lot of people have been killed on the streets of Bukavu?
Those who were killed, I think it must be those who were looting yesterday. I heard that some children who were still looting and others, they have been killed because they had arms, they were destroying stores, they were terrorizing people, and that's what happened yesterday when they come. They asked people, we want us to show those who are making insecurity, those who are looting, those who are destroying, because we want peace to be restored. And that's what happened yesterday. Those who were killed were those who were looting and who were using arms left by the government, so by the soldiers of government.
That was Fabian Mwezi, Secretary General of the Center of Political and Strategic Studies in Bukavu, speaking to VOA's Paul Ndiho. Still to come, we'll have an update on healthcare in Africa. Stay with us.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, the Central African Republic launched a meme last week. It soared to heights and then crashed. This is just one of the most recent examples of cryptocurrency investments that is on the rise in Africa. But what is cryptocurrency? Who stands to gain? Who controls it? Who is investing in it? Join me, Vincent McCory, for an in-depth discussion on cryptocurrency in Africa.
In other news, the leaders of Ethiopia's Tigray region are calling for the full implementation of the Pretoria Agreement that ended the conflict between Ethiopia's federal government and the Tigray rebels in 2022. The African Union brokered agreement reached in November 2022 required the cessation of hostilities, return of internally displaced people, disarmament, expedition of humanitarian access, and restoration of services in the region. Around 20 people were killed in northern Mali when the vehicles they were traveling in came under attack on Monday, with local sources telling AFP that Wagner mercenaries and Mali's army were responsible. A relative of the driver of one of the vehicles told AFP from the northern city of Gao that the group was bound for Algeria when the deadly attack occurred. It's time for our health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with news on universal health coverage in Africa. Hello, Lino.
Hello, Esther. Hello, everyone. Africa has more than 24% of the global burden of disease, but only 3% of the world's healthcare workers. The 2021 State of Universal Health Coverage in Africa report reveals that less than half of the people in Africa have access to the healthcare they need. Experts say people from the African diaspora, especially those in the medical field, can play a vital role in improving healthcare access and quality on the continent. The US-based NGO Community Health Foundation is an initiative to provide better care to the people of Sierra Leone. Joining me to discuss her organization's medical mission and impact is Dr. Linda Maxon-Cisse, founder of the Community Health Foundation. Dr. Cisse, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Ms. Leonard.
Your organization has been working in Sierra Leone, and you are based here. You even built a hospital. You just returned from a medical mission. Talk to us about what happened when you went there, and what are you seeing on the ground when you go to work with the communities?
The medical mission, we just came back from Sierra Leone with doctors here in the USA, California. We went there and we were able to provide free healthcare services to all population. People come from all over the country to our hospital. We were able to we saw 995 people, including there, we did 95 surgeries in 10 days, all successful. Some of the problems we saw there, of course, malaria is always there, and typhoid. And we did the surgeries we did. Some of the surgeries are a hernia for both men and women, scrotal hernia, umbilical hernia. We did fibroid, we did cyst, we did thyroid, like people who have big goiter, and different kind of surgeries, prolapse uterus. Yeah, so
a variety of medical services that you offer. Now, healthcare access and quality is a challenge in some countries, in some communities in Africa, and your organization is really doing tremendous work on the ground. How does your experience as a health worker here in the United States shape your approach to addressing healthcare in Africa, in your country in particular?
Yeah, well, being in the United States, and I also remember where I came from, growing up in Sierra Leone, I saw the desperate need for healthcare, especially on the maternal and child health, and that's why we are focused on that. Being in the U.S., I saw the differences. The kind of healthcare services people are getting here isn't there over there. So I want to make sure that we improve the healthcare, if not as to U.S. standard, but at least better than what it's been there before. So that's why I decided to form this organization, and we're providing healthcare services to Sierra Leoneans.
What do you think are the most critical barriers to healthcare access in your experience, whether it's infrastructure or qualified medical personnel? What do you see?
The main barrier is affordability, money. Most people don't have money to afford healthcare. And of course, there are no sometimes some areas there are no hospital access to healthcare. Like when you think about where my hospital is located, that community, that's the only hospital right now. Before then, there has been none. The only nearby hospital is 3 hours drive, and during rough roads. And in Sierra Leone, we have 2 seasons. Like during the rainy season, even the vehicle can get stuck on the road for bad road. They cannot take the people to the hospital. So this is a main barrier, basically affordability and the distance.
Distance. Okay, before we wrap, because we only have a few seconds left, experts say that the African diaspora, especially those in the medical field, can contribute tremendously. I mean, we see what you are doing. In what ways do you think they can contribute meaningfully?
Yeah, for example, like the medical mission we are doing right now, healthcare practitioners can offer their services to go provide free healthcare or whatever it is. And also collaboration, teamwork, we can partner. They can, ask for donation, even spreading the word that we need help in our country. Some hospital, you can talk to them, they will donate consumables, other things. There are so many ways we can collaborate to help our people.
Collaboration is important indeed. Dr. Moxon Cisse, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ms. Leonard.
And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on X at Lenore Mudu. Back to you, Esther.
Thanks, Lenore. Be sure to watch Lenore Mudu's health reports every Tuesday right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.
kusoo dhawaada barnaamijka qubanaha VOA waa talaado 17 waa 18 bisha Febraayo sanadka 2025 qodobada aan idin hayno waxaa kamid ah wasiirka arrimaha dibadda Mareykanka iyo waliba kan Ruushka oo maanta ku kulmay dalka Sacuudiga iyagoo ka dooday soo celinta xiriirka labada dal iyo waliba soo afjaridda colaadda Ukraine qaar kamid ah tahriibayaasha Itoobiyaanka ee ku xiran saldhigga Boosaaso oo dalbaday in aan dib loogu celin dalkooda oo ay sheegeen inay ka jirto shaqo la'aan iyo waliba colaad Cabdi Warsama oo Soomaali Mareykan ahna agaasimaha hay'adda guriyeynta dadweynaha ee Minnesota oo xal u raadinaya dhibaatada dhinaca guryaha ee gobolka Minnesota wanaagsan dhamaantiinba barnaamijka qubanaha VOA waxaan idin la socodsiinaya anigoo ah Falastiin Axmed Iimaan diblomaasiyiin sarsare oo Mareykan iyo Ruushka ayaa maanta oo talaado ah ku kulmay dalka Sacuudiga waxayna yeelanayaan kulankoodii ugu horeeyay ay ku soo celinayaan xiriirka ka dhaxeeya dalalkooda iyo waliba suuragalnimada in la soo afjaro dagaalka Ruushka ee Ukraine labada dhinac ayaa wada hadalladan ku tilmaamay bilow ah oo dejin karta qaab dhismeedka wada hadalka tooska ah ee dhexmara madaxweynaha Mareykanka Donald Trump iyo hogaamiyaha Ruushka Vladimir Putin xogayaha arrimaha dibadda Mareykanka Mark Rubio